State, are you prepared for an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. You may proceed.
Good afternoon. Your job as jurors is about to begin. And to reiterate what we went over yesterday, that job is to listen to the evidence, listen to the law, follow the law, and render a verdict. Our job as a state in this case is to prove this case to you through the evidence. We are going to do that by bringing in different witnesses who will testify, as well as entering different physical exhibits. And it's important to note that there is one witness that you do not have the opportunity to hear from. One witness who does not have the chance to take this witness stand, sit here, and tell you about what happened to her. And that's Cindy Deltoro. But through the evidence in this case, you're going to get to learn all about Cindy. You're going to learn that she was a wife, she was a mother to 3 kids, a grandmother to 5 children, and you're going to hear that back in December 14th of 2019, Cindy went out with her mother, her husband, and her son to celebrate her son's birthday. You're going to hear that on that night they went out for dinner, they got ice cream, they looked at Christmas lights, they dropped off her mother, and then they headed back to their home. This was just like any other night for Cindy, until it wasn't. That's why we're here. This was Cindy's last night. And you're going to learn that the person responsible for ending Cindy's life was Alexander Deltoro Jr., Cindy's son. Now how did this happen? You're going to hear that on that night, Mr. Deltoro Jr. knew that he had a loaded firearm. This was his firearm that he carried. And he took that loaded firearm, he took it out of its holster, he carried it, he put his finger on a trigger, and a bullet from that firearm ended up in the middle of Cindy's face. She had passed away at that point within minutes, if not seconds, right outside of her home. And throughout the evidence in this case, you're going to hear from the defendant's words different versions of what he said happened. You're going to hear the statement that he gave law enforcement on that night. And on that night, he says, he went out, it was his birthday, they get home, he gets into a verbal argument with his father, he throws a water bottle at him, his father has him pinned up against the wall, at which point the firearm in his holster is pinching him. So he takes it out and tosses it and states that's when it went off and hit his mother in the middle of her face. But you're going to learn through the evidence that in order for that firearm to go off, his finger had to have been on the trigger. And you're going to hear that that firearm was operable, all safeties were in place, and it was working just as it should have. But you're also going to hear another version, another story that the defendant has of that night. This one came years later. This version starts the same way. The family went out for his birthday. They get home. He gets into a verbal argument with his father. He throws a water bottle at him, and then that's when some shoving happens. During that shoving, his glasses fall off of his face. He can no longer see. And he says that even though he could not see, somehow he knew that his dad grabbed something out of his pocket. And he assumed, he guessed, that what his father took out of his pocket was another firearm. But the evidence in this case is going to show you that there was only one firearm. The firearm that in both of these versions, Mr. Deltoro Jr. says is his, and the firearm that the bullet came out of that struck his mother in her face. In this version, you're going to hear that when he thinks his dad took something out of his pocket that he thinks was a firearm and could have been, that at that point he takes out his loaded firearm that he knows is loaded, and he puts his finger on the trigger and he points it at his dad. He says at that time, even though he says that his dad had a firearm. He said his dad comes up to him and smacks his firearm. And when he did that, the firearm went off, a bullet came out, and it struck his mother in the middle of her face. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear that the common denominator in both of these versions, both of these stories that Mr. Deltoro Jr. tells, is that he had a loaded firearm that he knew was loaded. He carried that firearm. He took it out. He had his finger on the trigger, and because of that, Cindy Deltoro is no longer here. And we spoke about this in jury selection. The judge actually read you an instruction about how everyone has a duty to act reasonably towards each other. And how in this great country that we all live in, there are laws and rules that we all need to follow. There are laws and rules that we all share. And those are put in place to prevent innocent people from being killed based on the irresponsible actions of somebody else. You're going to learn all about those irresponsible actions of the defendant taking out that firearm, putting his finger on the trigger, and ending Cindy Deltoro's life. Now, I know some people might think maybe it was an accident. He didn't mean to kill his mother. But the evidence is going to show you that this is not an accident. It is not an accident to carry a firearm that is loaded, take it out, put your finger on the trigger. In carrying a firearm, everyone who does that has the responsibility to act responsibly with that firearm. And because of that, and because of those choices that Mr. Deltoro made, Cindy is no longer here. And ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you keep an open mind throughout the presentation of this case and the evidence and the witnesses that come in. And at the close of this case, after you have listened to the evidence, listened to the law, followed that law, and rendered a verdict in this case, that it will be one that that law supports, that that law will demand, that justice requires, and that will be that you find Mr. Alexander Deltoro Jr. guilty of manslaughter with a firearm. Thank you. Defense.
Okay, please, court, prosecutors. It's December 14th, 2019. It's Alex's 28th birthday. Gets up at 5:30 in the morning, and him and his parents go to the swap shop where they buy, sell, and trade jewelry and different items. Because his mom had been stalked before and because they'd been robbed once at the swap shop before, Alex takes a firearm and locks it in his glove box. They go there all day. They get home around 2:30 in the afternoon and take a nap. We get up at 5 o'clock and we get ready to celebrate his birthday. Junior goes in. Junior is my client. Alex Deltoro Sr., you're going to hear people refer to him as Senior. He stays in a studio apartment and it's divided up by a Chinese, like the dividers. He goes into their part of the studio to see if they're ready. He has already been ready. His mom's putting on jewelry. His dad puts his wallet in his pocket and puts his firearm in his right front jacket pocket. They go to their Aunt Pam's, that's Cindy's sister, and pick up his grandmother, their both sisters' mother. And the reason why they pick up his grandmother is because they like to include her in everything that they do. 2 months prior to this, her husband had passed away at 67 years, and 1 month prior, her sister died. So they include his grandmother in basically whatever they do. They end up going over there and they go inside the Aunt Pam's house to pick up his grandma. They stay for about 30 minutes, and then they help her, because she uses a walker, to go into the house, to go from the house into the car. From there, they've called up ahead of time to get Chinese food. They go to pick up the Chinese food, and that was for Junior and his grandmother. And then they go to Polo Tropical, and they pick up food for the parents. They all ate in the parking lot. From there, they go to Butterfly World, where they see the Christmas lights over at Tradelands Park. From there, they go to Dairy Queen, where Junior and his mom get out, get the ice cream, and then they all eat in the car. From there, they go back to the Aunt Pam's to drop off his granny, and they go in there, help Granny in, and they all spend time. Junior is sitting right next to the kitchen table where his Aunt Pam, his mom, and his grandmother are talking, and his father goes off to the adjacent room to watch TV. After about 45 minutes, Senior gets up, and he walks past him, and he goes, "Time to go." And he walks out. His Aunt Pam says, "You better go." And his mom says, "Keep going." Within a few minutes, they start hearing honking. Aunt Pam says, "That's your sign," and they get up and they leave. Now, from his Aunt Pam's to his house where they were staying is roughly a 10-minute drive at the most. First thing, when they get into the car, his father says, "You know, you guys talk way too much." They get in the car, and Senior sits, Junior's driving, it's a small Mitsubishi Mirage, and Senior sits in the front passenger seat, and his mom sits behind the passenger seat. That way, Junior can watch his mom, and they have eye contact. On the way home, Senior starts playing with the radio and actually finds a song that he liked, and he starts bebopping to the music. Unusual for him, he started joking and talking, acting a little goofy, but it was nice. I mean, it was different. They're approaching, they're going westbound on Atlantic Boulevard, and they're approaching 441. Junior's in the innermost left turn lane. There's a car right next to him in the second turning lane. They start to make the turn, and the car in the lane right next to them starts to come into his lane, and he moves to just avoid the accident. When he does that, his elbow touches his father in the jaw. Junior has never once ever touched his father, he's afraid of him, never done anything remotely even to touch, much less intentionally strike his father. Junior immediately apologizes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And his father snaps. His father says, I should beat your fucking ass. I should punch you in the face. Knock you out. Raised his fist. And Junior's mom was going, babe, it's his birthday, he didn't mean it, he apologized. And the senior says, you always speak up for him. He's not a fucking baby anymore. Shut your mouth. Junior tried to apologize again, and then he looks back, and he sees his mom, and he just get the eye contact. And the little subtle of the hand. And don't say anything else. They're only about 2 minutes from their house at this point. They get home, he backs into the space, and senior gets out. He slams his door, and then he opens up the door right behind him, which is where his mom's sitting. Puts him there, and then he slams that door, right in her face. Hard. Opens up the trunk, and then he slams the trunk after looking in there. And he opens up the back passenger door. And his mom goes, what are you looking for? And he slams that. And then Junior goes to his mom, I don't even want to go. I don't even want to go in there. She goes, don't be silly. Get your stuff. I'll talk to him. So Junior opens up the glove box, puts his gun on his hip, inside. He gets his water bottle, and he's just watching in the mirror, the side mirror and then the back mirror. And he hears his mom talking to his father, why are you upset with me? I didn't do anything. And Senior goes, you're not a fucking boy anymore. All you do is baby. And then he kept at her, and then he gets up to her, chest pumps her, and pushes her. Junior sees that from the rear view mirror. That's when he gets out of the car and throws his water bottle on his father. He misses him. Misses him. Father is really upset at this point, and Junior gets in between them, and he's facing his father. And he says, what are you doing? Mom didn't do anything. It was a mistake. I apologize. She has nothing to do with this. His father pushed him, and then Junior, for the first time ever in his whole life, pushed his father back. That infuriated his father. His father took his hand, wrapped it across his face, broke his glasses, ripped off his chains, and when he did that, Junior dropped his keys, and then, real quick, his father twisted his arm behind his back, grabbed him by the hair, and he started to push him, and his mom comes up and tries to get in between them, and he grabs her by the hair. Now he's got Junior with his back, and he's pushing both of them, and then pushes his mom to the ground. mom's down on the ground, and his father takes him and rushes him about 12 to 15 feet up against the next door neighbor's wall of their apartment. His mom got all the strength that she had, came back over, and literally pushed his father off of him and made him go back to good body weight. This is like the first for everything. Senior doesn't take well with this type of stuff. Upon that, Senior looks over at Alex and says, "You fuck with me. I'm sick and tired of this fucking shit. You and your mother." And at that point, his father reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out his gun. Junior, fearing for his life and his mom's, pulled out his gun real quick. He wrapped it and he pointed it at his father's waist. Junior said, "Please, just go. Leave us alone." And within an instant, his father took his left hand and real quick hit the right hand of Junior, which caused the hand to move to the side and caused it to discharge because of his hand being on the trigger and he hit his mother. Junior let out an hysterical, horrifying, anguishing cry. He yelled out and dropped to the ground with his mom. He immediately calls 911 and he tells them everything that's going on. While he's doing that, he looks up. He can see the parking lot and exactly what's going on as his back is to the wall now. And while he's talking to 911 and explaining everything that's going on, he sees his father. His father's walking briskly behind the car. And his father picks up the keys that were left, picks up his mom's pocketbook that was dropped when he pushed her, and some change. He's still crying hysterically, trying to tell everything to 911, and he sees his father come and go into the house. And his father disappears for a few minutes. Well, at this point, neighbors are all calling 911, and you have one of the neighbors came over to Allison because she's still breathing. You have a chance. He runs to his car and gets a second pair of glasses because he's legally blind without them. He can still see, but he can't read and wouldn't pass the driving test. When he gets back to his mom, he sees his father come out, and he just stays by the doorway, holding a little dog. About 2 minutes later or so, when the first officer arrives, the officer tries to render aid, tries to stop the bleeding. Junior immediately starts to tell the officer what had occurred. And once 911 heard that he's talking to the officer and the officer is talking to him and trying to render aid, he says, "You can hang up now." Weird part is, throughout this whole period of time, His father never left that doorway. Not once in all this time that's transpired did he ever come over to his dying wife. Not once did he show any emotion. Not once did he cry. Not once did he holler out in any kind of anguish. No tears. No 911 despite having his son was there. At this point, the crime scene investigator, a bunch of other cops and detectives arrive. The crime scene investigator immediately starts to swab both senior and junior's hands. The gunshot residue, she basically swabs the hands and then puts that into a little pouch, breaks an ampule, and does that for each of them. Then she takes the outer clothing that they can test for gunshot residue, and she takes their shoes, takes a bunch of pictures of them, and the detectives are there, gets a rough version of, a quick version of what had occurred. And Junior told him everything, up until the point where he did say that the gun was pinching him. And Senior gives a third version of what occurred. The detectives take him to the station, and the first thing they do is they take a statement from Senior. It's a sworn statement. And at this point, the detectives, they've already made up their mind. They knew the junior was holding the gun, and the gun went off, and the gun is what ended up killing his mom. The detectives, that's all they needed. They didn't need any more. They didn't know anymore, really. The detectives say, we can promise you, talk to the senior, anything for your cooperation. And despite Senior giving a number of versions about what happened, different ones, they tell him, don't worry, we're going to take you home soon. We'll have an officer take you home. We're just going to talk to your son and get his version real quick, and then we'll take you home and take care of you. Then they take a sworn tape statement from Junior that you all will see. And Junior tells everything that happened, and he was consistent, and he did say that the gun was pinching him. And then the officers say to him, we know what happened. We talked to your dad. Own up to it. So Junior trying to figure out what his father told him. So he ended up saying that he took the gun out and he was trying to just keep it away from his father so his father didn't get a hold of it. And the cops get on him more and more and more, and they tell him everything matches your father's story up to a certain point. When Junior finally says that he tried to scare his father to keep him away. He tried, probably all thinking now, why is he doing this? Well, his father is a violent, convicted felon, not allowed to own or possess a firearm. And Junior always told his mom, if anything ever happened to her, he would take care of his dad and look after him. The cops get real frustrated, and they explain that they're really frustrated with him. And then they said, we just want to tell you your mom didn't make it. There's consequences for your actions. We want to arrest you. And then they said, do you have any questions? And he goes, my dad. Question mark. And they did the same thing. And then they said, they told him to start taking off his jewelry, and they were going to put it in an evidence bag, and he says, can you give it to my dad? He's trying to make sure that nothing's happening to his dad. And that was his way of doing it. Now, you're going to hear about these detectives. You're going to hear about an extremely poor, inept investigation, if that's what you want to call it. You're going to hear that they never pursued the truth. Despite the fact the senior story kept changing in major ways. Despite the fact that Junior, when he was talking to the cop, said, I'm sure you know his history. Despite all this, something they normally do in every case is, first thing they do is they would run Junior and Senior for priors. They never ran them for priors. They would have found a whole host of them, violent ones. You're going to hear that the gunshot residue test that they did was never sent to the lab for confirmation. Real easy. Normally, in a case like this, you would hear these 911 tapes because it's so much relevant information that you can gather just by hearing what's going on, what everyone's saying. You got all these different people calling at the same time, giving their views. You're not going to have the opportunity to hear these 911 tapes because the detectives somehow either lost or misplaced them. They don't even know whether they even listened to them. So they never ran them for priors, and they never followed up on little things. Little things like, why when your wife just gets shot, she's down on the ground, she's still breathing, you go over to the vehicle 15 feet away, get the keys that Junior dropped because that's what he was looking for, was the house keys, get the purse, and then go in the house and never go to your dying wife. Never followed up on it. Never followed up on the fact that he gave all these versions that were different. Never followed up on why he just stayed in the doorway and never moved from that one spot. Never to tell you that it seems strange that his father didn't show any emotion whatsoever. No one saw him ever crying and showing any tears, being even looking upset. And they're going to tell you that despite the fact that Junior was afraid of his father and never ever touched his father, back-talked his father, held his hand up to his father, on a day when they're out celebrating his birthday and they were having a relatively good day, no problems, There's two big people in a small Mitsubishi Mirage where he's trying to avoid an accident, where he accidentally hits his father in the chin. They're 2 minutes from home. He immediately apologizes. And these detectives will tell you that they had no problem with Senior's credibility, that Junior intentionally cold-cocked his father. And no problem with his credibility when it came to that whatsoever. And follow up on how his glasses got broke or his canes got broke. Or even to talk to his father about, well, what got Junior so upset to the point where he would actually pull his gun out. You're going to hear from the firearms expert. He's going to tell you that because firearms aren't perfectly sealed, when it's shot, gunshot particles resonate out of the muzzle in a cone shape, and they go out about 2 to 3 feet. And the reason why they do these gunshot residue tests is to tell if someone either shot a gun or was so close to it that they would have gunshot residue on it. You're going to hear from the crime scene investigator that it was never sent anywhere for confirmation. She took part in the search warrant, which occurred a few hours later the following morning, and tell you that it was a relatively quick search, that they really weren't looking for hiding places or padding clothing, or she didn't even know there was information that there was even another firearm. You're going to hear about Cindy Deltoro, his mom. Very caring, giving, loving mother. Beautiful, intelligent, and she was extremely frail. You see, she had one kidney that was only working at 20%. Her other kidney was working at 30 to 40% at the most. She was on a transplant list. You're going to hear that she had stage 4 skin cancer. She had skin grafts all over her body. She was in constantly extreme pain. She was given some pretty heavy medications for the pain and for anxiety. And you're going to hear how her life is totally controlled by Senior. Every aspect of her life. Who she could talk to, who she could visit, whether she could have a conversation with Junior. Every aspect of her life was controlled by him. Does anyone hear that? Including her prescription medication. That was controlled by Senior also. She would have to beg and plead with him to get any medication. And when he did give it, he only did half the amount, he did the other half. She wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened to her, that Senior was looked after, and Junior always promised her that he would do that. Now you're going to hear about Senior also. You're going to hear about a person that was mentally abusive, explosive, unpredictable, extremely controlling, was a bullied everyone. extremely jealous, especially of his wife, had a tendency to go into extreme rages. He was extremely intimidating, super scary. And that anyone that was around him, anyone in the family or whatever, he walked on eggshells. You're going to hear about how he treated Junior up until this day. Called him fat, soft, sissy, gay, mama's boy, pussy. You're going to hear about a person that would never work. For the years that Cindy was dying, never worked at all. Junior supported. They stayed at their Aunt Pam's for a couple of years when Cindy was sick. And then Junior saved up his money to get a studio and brought his parents into the studio with him. And the reason why he did that, because he was not going to let his mom alone with his dad. And she needed someone to care for her. You're going to hear about someone that is incredibly strong and was prison tough. And he was extremely tough and strong. Multiple violent felony convictions that detectives should have known. And you're going to hear about a person that took a gun everywhere he went. We're not just talking about this day. We're talking about if he went out to the corner, if he went to walk the dog, if he went to church, he had a gun with him all the time. You're going to hear about Aunt Pam Silva, his aunt, his mom's sister, and a little bit about the family dynamics, how her sister was her best friend, and how she would watch her sister beg and plead for pain medication, and seeing her not get it half the time, or do it with her the other half. And she was there on December 14, 2019. She was there when Alex went with his parents to pick up his granny. Not much happened. You know, when they went in to pick her up, it stayed about half hour, not much happened. They came back, dropped her off. We stayed about 45 minutes, and I told you that Senior was just watching TV. They were all talking, and how he got up and said, time to go. And the next time that she's aware of anything, like 4:30 in the morning, banging on the door. Next you know, more banging on the door. She opens up the door, and it's Senior with two police officers. And she's in her night clothes. They just keep your fucking clothes on. She's like, what? And she's looking, and two cops, keep your fucking clothes on. She goes, gets her clothes on, and he goes, Cindy's dead. And he walks into the other room, the granny is, whispers in her ear that Granny's dead. 10 minutes later, he leaves. Doesn't say how it happened, doesn't say one word. And the next time that she sees him was later on that day, around dinner time. And he comes in and he's got a little bag that he keeps her medications in, a few things from their apartment, And he sits down and he puts the gun right on the table right next to him. Aunt Pam and Granny, and they live with her husband Mark. They all like, keep that gun out of here. Please, get that gun out of here. He actually stayed there for the following month until Junior made bond, and they weren't allowed to be together, so he finally moved out there. The entire time he had to go. Always had to go. And you're going to hear about Junior, obviously. He's 28, then he's 33 now. This case has been hanging over his head for 5.5 years. You hear about a sweet, quiet, soft-spoken, very hard worker, person that had a love for life, a person that had a sense for family, especially when it came to his mom and his grandparents. So on weekends and off days, he'd rather spend the time with his mom and his grandparents than with his friends. There was no violence in him, no hatred. He loved his mother more than anything in this world. And he feared his father equally. As much as he loved his mother, that's how much he feared his father. You know, Junior's never been in trouble a day in his life. Never even got a traffic ticket. Never even got in trouble in school. Church every week. You're going to hear that his love for his grandparents was so much because his mom, a nurse, would have to work single and double shifts all the time to make ends meet. Because his dad, throughout his whole life, was in and out of prison. And when his dad was out of prison, he picked him on it, not working. You're going to hear how Junior was protective and supportive of his mother. He was the only one. She had to have certain foods. He cooked for her every meal, did the cleaning, did the clothes, took her to the doctors. He worked real long hours, but he made sure he worked at night so that he could spend the days with her. And then he supported everyone and he never complained. When you hear he pulled the gun when he did because he was in fear for his and his mother's life. The evidence is going to show that he was not reckless in handling the gun and that he did this as a last resort after his father reached into his pocket and pulled out his gun. You're going to hear the inconsistencies in his testimony, but when you listen to them, you will also hear that every time that there's these inconsistencies, it's not to protect himself. It's not to extricate himself from criminal liability or anything else like that. It was all done to protect his father. And truth be told, what he did worked. His father was never investigated. They never looked into anything. The cops never even read the Miranda. They never even talked to him after that one little time that they spoke to him. That was it. After the evidence, when you apply the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof being beyond the exclusion of a reasonable doubt, you're going to find that there's reasonable doubt all three ways, not just one. You're going to find reasonable doubt from the evidence, You're going to find reasonable doubt from the lack of evidence, and you're going to certainly find reasonable doubt from the inconsistencies in the evidence. And at that point, we're going to hesitantly ask you to end this nightmare and return a verdict of not